Thanks for joining us for CBN NewsWatch. I'm Caitlin Burke.
And I'm Ephraim Graham. At least 14 people are dead and more than 70 injured after Islamic terrorists attacked two churches in Pakistan. One day after the bombings, the entire Christian community is in mourning. Gary Lane has the story.
Christians gathered in protest throughout Pakistan as their tiny minority community prepared to bury the dead. Suicide bombers blew themselves up near two churches in the city of Lahore as Christians gathered for Sunday worship. The blasts occurred in quick succession in a Christian neighborhood known as Yohanabad. This man survived one of the bombings. He said the first blast occurred at a Catholic church where security was tight.
And second attack to the Church of Pakistan is the Christ Church, and 2 persons is arrested at the moment in the Pathan, and there's so many people is injured. Personally, I can feel in the 3 dead body I can see in the Church of Pakistan, and mostly people is injured.
Christians took to the streets immediately after the bombings, demanding justice and an end to the targeting of their communities. This Christian leader said, "We demand the government provide protection to all places of worship, of all religions, including Muslim prayer places. In Pakistan, minorities are insecure and we want security. We are well-wishers of Pakistan and loyal to the country." But instead of awaiting legal justice, some of the angry Pakistani protesters took matters into their own hands, burning to death one of the suspected bombing accomplices and reportedly killing another. The video images are too graphic to show here. A faction of the Pakistani Taliban claimed responsibility for the church attacks. A police investigation continues. Gary Lane, CBN News.
The Obama administration is dropping plans to slash the number of troops in Afghanistan. The White House wanted to cut the number to 5,500 by the end of the year, but military leaders have been fighting to keep more boots on the ground. No final decision has been made on the numbers, but 9,800 troops are currently in Afghanistan.
Insiders say there's little hope that Iranian and U.S. negotiations will come up with a framework for a deal on Iran's nuclear program within the next 2 weeks. The best they can hope for is an agreement to hold more talks. That is not likely to satisfy critics of the negotiations in America and Iran. Meanwhile, the Obama administration is putting the focus on Republican senators who sent an open letter to Iran's leaders. Secretary of State John Kerry blasted the senators for their letter, saying any deal will need congressional approval. On CNN, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell said the administration is dodging the real issues.
The administration would like to have a distraction, but the point is the substance of the matter. Are they or are they not about to make a very bad deal that will allow the Iranians, one of the worst regimes in the world, to continue to have their nuclear infrastructure?
Now comes word that the Iranians are making a new demand. They want to keep an underground facility that has hundreds of centrifuges capable of enriching uranium for nuclear warheads.
Israel's soldiers have already begun to vote in a crucial election to choose the country's next prime minister. Balloting for the rest of Israel begins Tuesday, and final polls show Benjamin Netanyahu's Likud party trailing a union of leftist parties. But the prime minister sounded a note of victory as he addressed a rally of thousands in Tel Aviv. Chris Mitchell reports from Jerusalem.
Last week, tens of thousands of mostly secular leftists packed into Tel Aviv's Rabin Square for an anyone but Bibi protest. But Sunday, Bibi himself addressed an even bigger crowd. He warned that a leftist win would be dangerous for Israel and urged his people to get out the vote.
This is a faithful struggle, a close struggle. We must close this gap. We can close this gap.
A little more than a week ago, Netanyahu paid a surprise visit here to Jerusalem's Mahaneh Yehuda market. These are Bibi's people, strong on national security, and he'll need a big turnout from supporters around the country to stay in office. Who are you supporting tomorrow?
I think Bibi, Likud.
How come? Lama?
Lama? Because he's the best, I know.
Bibi, because he take care of the civilian, of the security in the country. We need to take care of the children, all the families in Israel, what we can do.
Labor Party leader Itzhak Herzog visited the Western Wall Sunday. His Zionist Union coalition holds a 4-seat lead over Likud. But Israel is still a center-right country, and Likud would have to take a shellacking for Herzog to get first chance at forming the next government. At the Netanyahu rally, observers say the biggest boos were against the foreign money coming into a group called V15, which funded a leftist get-out-the-vote drive. Fox News reports that the U.S. Senate will investigate the State Department. Lawmakers want to know if money for V15 was improperly or illegally routed to the Defeat Netanyahu coalition through a group called One Voice. V15 co-founder Itamar Weissman talked to CBN News last month about the effort.
Our whole purpose is to go door by door and to call supporters and to call voters and to pledge people not to vote for Netanyahu in the coming elections.
These soldiers in southern Israel cast their ballots Sunday, a sign that the bitter campaign is almost over. Millions more Israelis will head to the polls until they close on Tuesday night. Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Police in Ferguson have arrested a man in connection with the protest shooting that put 2 officers in the hospital. 20-year-old Jeffrey Williams was taken into custody last night. Williams told authorities the officers were not the intended targets and that he was firing at someone else after a dispute. Both officers involved were seriously hurt but are expected to be okay.
We have an update to the story of that Navy chaplain under fire for expressing his Christian faith while counseling service members. Chaplain Wes Motor has been reassigned from the Naval Nuclear Power Training Command as he awaits a hearing on whether he'll be punished. As CBN News has reported, there are complaints that Motor expressed his Christian views against premarital sex and homosexuality. Motor's attorney says he's obligated to express the beliefs of his church.
Military policy, again, says that it is the endorsing denomination that really holds all the cards when it comes to being a chaplain. And if a chaplain does something that is contrary to the doctrinal tenets of that endorsing denomination, that denomination can pull the endorsement. They can remove the endorsement, which means that that person can't even serve as a chaplain anymore.
The Assemblies of God minister could be fired just months before he reaches his 20-year retirement.
Officials at an Air Force base in Georgia are reversing their ban against wishing visitors a blessed day. Last week, Robins Air Force Base told security personnel to drop the friendly greeting. That came after a threat from the Military Religious Freedom Foundation. The anti-Christian group's founder says that's a sectarian greeting. Now officials say the phrase "Have a blessed day" does not violate Air Force standards. Guards may now mention that phrase if they choose to.
New York City could soon be bringing prayer back to the classroom. It's all part of Mayor Bill de Blasio's initiative to provide free pre-kindergarten programs. It depends in part on the participation of Jewish, Christian, and Muslim schools. The administration announced that pre-K programs will be allowed to take breaks for non-program activities like prayer. Civil liberties groups are objecting, saying that prayer in a publicly funded classroom violates the Constitution. Some religious schools are also critical of the program. A major Jewish group says the pre-K program is too restrictive.
The president of Vanuatu is calling for help after a cyclone ripped through the country, killing at least 8 people and injuring at least 30 others. President Baldwin Lonsdale says the storm has, quote, wiped out all of the developments from recent years. He says his country will have to rebuild everything. Right now, communications are down, so officials can't confirm how widespread the damages are.
Coming up, too close for comfort, why new technologies hitting the market could be paving the way for the mark of the beast.
Fake IRS agents have been calling people since 2013 in a huge tax scam. One IRS official says it's the largest such scam in the agency's history. The fake agents tell people they owe taxes and they have to pay those taxes right away by prepaid debit card or a wire transfer. They also threaten people with being arrested, losing a driver's license, or other penalties. The IRS points out it contacts people by mail and never asks for payment by a debit or credit card or wire transfer.
Our increasingly mobile lifestyles have increased demands for mobile smart devices. Now all eyes are on the upcoming release of the iWatch. The iWatch will have processing abilities like a computer and communication abilities like a smartphone. It will also have Apple Pay capabilities. Critics say it's the perfect example of society getting too close for comfort to invasive technologies. For more, Mark Martin spoke with consumer privacy expert and author of children's book, I Won't Take the Mark, Catherine Albrecht.
We have actually moved in the last maybe 10 or 15 years, according to research, from a world in which the vast majority of Americans would say they would never take a microchip implant or a payment device on their right hand, to a world in which now you have the vast majority of Apple users super excited about the new iWatch. You also have, according to some recent published studies, up to 50% of Americans saying that they would welcome an implanted device in their hand if it would do those same things that the iWatch does. So we're kind of moving closer and closer to that right hand and closer to the fulfillment of biblical prophecy about the mark of the beast.
We can already use smartphones for financial information and transactions. What about using those implanted chips for the same purpose?
Well, we've seen in recent weeks, Mark, in Sweden, there was a chipping party back in November in which 8 people were implanted with microchips by, in this case, they were hobbyists, and it was a very tattooed, body-modified person who injected them into them. That same individual has now taken an entire office building in Sweden and implanted many of the employees there, hooking up the office door and the photocopiers and a number of other things around the office so that you merely have to scan the chip in your hand in order to access them. So certainly Scandinavian countries seem very big on this. We had a big press conference just a couple of weeks ago in Finland in which the CEO of a major corporation claimed to be the very first person to accept digital payment into his hand implant in the form of Bitcoin. So it's certainly gaining momentum. The proponents of this claim that up to 1,000 people worldwide have been implanted with this technology, and they're really seeing this as the wave of the future.
Are we going to see implanted chips, Dr. Albrecht, eventually replacing cash?
I actually think we won't. Back in 2007, I authored a study that looked at 10 years worth of research, published peer-reviewed academic research showing that implanted microchips were actually causing cancer in laboratory mice and rats. We've since received on our chipmenot.com website, that's chipmenot.com, reports from a number of dog and cat owners, reports from published studies showing that everything from llamas to bats to all sorts of animals that have been implanted with these chips for other reasons are developing fast-growing tumors around the implanted microchip. And since this is a radio frequency transponder, it's picking up and amplifying electromagnetic radiation from the environment, and that's probably not a safe thing to have in the body.
Well, what are the big brother implications here?
I think the concern and is probably best expressed by the people who are doing the chipping in Sweden. And rather ironically, they state that they're worried that it's inevitable, they say, that at some future point, the government and employers will require this technology, and they want to be the pioneers to experiment with it and be able to tell the rest of us the downsides. So to me, it seems like if you're concerned about something, you probably want to run from it rather than run to it, but that's their justification. And I've actually authored a piece of legislation called the Bodily Integrity Act, which is at antichips.com. That's our anti-human chipping site. I should mention that we put a stop to the chipping of Alzheimer's patients and indeed all medical chipping in the U.S. in 2007 when we held a prayer vigil and a protest outside the Alzheimer's Community Care Center in West Palm Beach, Florida, where they were planning to chip 200 Alzheimer's patients. So we've written a one-page piece of legislation that says that no one should be forced to receive an implant, no one should be discriminated against for government services or employment in any way for refusal to take one, and that you should have to be over 18 to get one, only because you have to be over 18 to smoke or join the army or do other things that might be dangerous, and you need to be with your full faculties to make this decision.
What are the global implications for this type of technology, considering that though this is happening in some places, there are other countries nowhere near this type of capability?
Yeah, what's concerning to me, Finland, the country where they did the first implant of cash, or claim to have done that, Finland is actually working with some countries, some very poor countries in Africa. They're very future-oriented. Their parliament actually requires that they do a future statement every year and that they adopt all the futuristic technologies. And they're training some third world nations to get on board with and adopt this too. We're also seeing that some of the Wave and Go or PayPass kinds of things being introduced by MasterCard across Africa.
Okay, Dr. Catherine Albrecht, thanks as always for your time.
Thank you so much.
Up next, on stage, he's always high energy, but sometimes this hip-hop star can't find the strength to get out of bed. Trip Lee talks about his struggle with chronic illness and his determination to rise up.
Have fun, be happy, sow your wild oats. You have the rest of your life to get serious. These are just some of the messages bombarding young people.
Yeah, but one hip-hop musician is singing a different tune, even in the face of a chronic illness. When I recently caught up with Trip Lee, he told me why he wants his generation to rise up.
The stage is set, the sound check complete, and the crowd ready. Hip-hop artist Trip Lee is the man on the mic, and he's also known as Pastor William Lee Bearfield III.
That we can be restored to that role through the Lord Jesus, who got sent for that very reason.
His stage name and rap platform helps reach young fans with the gospel.
You've been at this rap game now how long?
About 10 years.
10 years?
About 10 years, yeah. I signed a record deal when I was in high school.
That deal was with superstar Christian rapper Lecrae's Reach Records. The two became friends after meeting backstage at a concert in Dallas, their hometown.
Now, Rise is your fifth album? What do you think is different about this than when you started with the first one?
Very different stages of life, you know what I'm saying? I started that record when I was 17 years old in high school, my first album. And now I am 27 with 2 kids and a wife, and it's just a lot more mature.
His latest music pokes fun at those humble beginnings and that very first concert tour with Lecrae. In his words, we've gone from bootleg tours to high-quality shows.
On that tour, it was like people booked us. We showed up. We had a DJ play some music, and we rapped on it. The sound could have been terrible. The production wouldn't have been that great. We didn't think through our sets that well.
Do you think God was any less glorified in those shows versus what you're doing now?
I don't. You know, I think if we, God has called us to be faithful with what he's entrusted us with.
Thank you so much for coming to the Rise Tour tonight.
Trip Lee is also trusting his audience, sharing a painful struggle in his music. For more than 7 years, he's battled an illness that makes it hard to even get out of bed, let alone take the stage.
You suffer from chronic fatigue syndrome. What is that?
That's a good question. You know, doctors don't even understand it very well. But basically what it means for me practically in my life is I'm always tired. So I can't remember the last time I woke up feeling rested. And my body just doesn't recharge like normal bodies do. And it really has impacted my life in major ways. It has ruined lots of my plans. It's never gotten in the way of the Lord's plans, but it's ruined lots of mine.
Fatigue forced Trip to drop out of college and later walk away from a full-time job as assistant pastor.
I think I read that someone said you have the ambition of 2 men, but the energy of 1/4 of a man. True?
Whoever said that is true, is accurate, yeah. The Lord has taught me a lot through it, man. I mean, everything I do, from an album to a book to anything, I never just kind of cruise to the finish line. I just barely get it done. I just kind of drag myself across, barely limp. And that makes it so clear to me that anytime God uses something I do, anytime there's fruit from it, that it's not because of my strength, it's because of his.
That supernatural strength has allowed this husband, father, preacher, and rapper to complete his second book. Like the album, it's also called Rise.
A 3-minute song can have significant impact in your life, but I'm thinking, how can I take people even deeper? And writing is one of the ways that I want to do that. In this particular book, I just really wanted to address the crazy idea in our culture that while we're young, we're not that, our life and decision making isn't that important yet, or that we can't make big impact for God, or that God doesn't expect that much from us. That could not be more false.
I knew God could not have saved me for me to sit around and wait to live forever too late.
Tripp uses all platforms to deliver that rise up message, and he hasn't given up on the pulpit. He's joining forces with 2 other ministers to start Cornerstone, a new church in a struggling area of Atlanta.
Is there, I guess, a pulling in you to try and choose? Do I go pastoring or do I continue rapping?
Of course. Yeah, and that's been a battle for me over the past few years. One of the battles it's been in many ways hindered by my health, you know. So there have been times when I've tried to make the decision, you know what, I'm gonna leave music in the past and I'm just gonna pastor. And I have not found a way to pastor full time with my health issues. The kind of flexibility that I need. I just haven't figured out a way to do it yet.
These days, he spends less time trying to make his plans work and more time following God's lead on stages he never really imagined for himself.
If I trust in that God, then I know he's with me in the midst of this suffering, and that I can be content with him in that, and I can trust his plan much more than mine. God has never said, I'm going to stamp all your plans as the best thing that ever happens. Actually, Scripture says he's going to change our plans sometimes, and that's what he's done. And I think in many ways, he's increased my dependence on him.
And God is increasing the audience for Tripp Lee.
Wow, hard to believe. He just wrapped up that concert tour last night in Kansas City. Suffering from that illness doesn't look like it considering what he does on stage, but great.
Such a great message.
Indeed, indeed. Let's rise up. Stay with us. We're coming right back.
And finally, we'd like to bring you a bit of encouragement to take you through the day.
It is Monday, and you can call this your Monday motivation. In fact, I had this thought as I began my own day with prayer and meditation. The climb up the mountain may be tiring and tough, but the view is always best at the top. So keep climbing. That is true in the literal sense, or if you've ever gone up a hill or a mountain, you know that it is more beautiful at the top, and in difficult situations, it's better that you hang in there. So I certainly pray that you'll be more inspired with that Monday motivation.
That's it for now on CBN News NewsWatch. You can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care about most at cbnnews.com.
And we'd like to hear from you. We want to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that on Facebook or at CBN News on Twitter. Hope you join us again right here next time, and make it a marvelous Monday, everybody.